This is Jeremy Wentworth Stanley. I'm the fellow who has a hyphen in my name. The hyphen is silent, but I am anything but that. Respectonomics brings you the living economics, and this one is called addiction. I want to share with you some thoughts about addiction, and we will have a look to see what happens when there is a process of addiction. My name is Jeremy Wentworth Stanley. I am your voice of Respectonomics. I'm also your year of Respectonomics. And we're going to be talking about addiction, which in the world of economics initially may seem almost discordant. It may seem like it's not particularly related. But I want to go through some ideas about addiction and some of the risks that we are encountering. I found this passage that was on the internet, and it read, "Addiction is a chronic disorder precipitated by repeated drug use. It is marked by continued drug use despite harmful consequences, affecting motivation and memory functions and leading to uncontrollable drug use. Addiction can destroy relationships, ruin careers, and damage their well-being. To overcome these destructive effects, the addicted person needs immediate help. So when we're looking at the economy in the context of addiction, you might instantly think of alcohol and cigarettes and opiates and that kind of thing. Actually, what we're talking about in the world of economics is another addiction. An addiction that is now worldwide. It is an addiction that is practically in every nation. It is an addiction that is being ignored, misstated, doesn't have a visual presence. It's just one where there's a high degree of acceptance. And the addiction we're talking about is the addiction to debt. I'll give you one example of the debt position, and we'll use the American one, which is that it's estimated that by the end of the year, that the interest payments will be amounting to $1 trillion. Put it another way, the interest payments on the federal debt amount to $3 billion a day. We want to look at this issue of addiction to debt as an addiction, because as that article pointed out, it is a chronic disorder and it is by repeated drug use. We need to look at addiction from several points of view. The first one is that as an addiction process intensifies, there are two things that will typically happen. Whatever the drug is or whatever the source of the addiction is, it will be needed in more quantity. So where should we say in alcohol, the 1 drink a day becomes 2 drinks a day, 3 drinks a day, and so on. It becomes accretive or accumulative. It is increasing. And it also increases with frequency. It's not just every 3 days, it becomes every day, every hour, and so on. Addiction has a certain what would you call it? That idea of perpetual motion. It goes on and on and on. So we have this chronic disorder of debt, and why this is so serious is that we have recognized orbitally, meaning around the world, that every nation is engaging in more and more debt, and we do it more frequently and more easily. And what is the risk of this addiction? We've already seen in this description that it has harmful consequences. The harmful consequences are that we are creating a debt burden that is not necessarily a burden to us, but is to our generations that follow us, which is under the heading of we want to finish well. It is somewhat remarkable and somewhat inconsistent that we should be accumulating and accreting and adding to this debt under the general premise that the burden will fall on our legacy, on our inheritance. I can't believe that that is where our hearts would be. The other part is this, that when you have an addictive issue, addictions become enabling. They say that if you are addicted in one area, then it becomes an enabling act that other people will say, if you can be addicted to that, then I can be addicted to this. So it becomes a question of osmosis, a question of if it works in one place, it can work in another, even though the actual disorder may be different. You might say, for example, that the alcoholic will say, will be an alcoholic, and will then say, or allow someone who's in, let's say, has an aptitude for addiction, and that they will then say, well, I'm going to be addicted to something else. And the two sort of enable each other. If it's okay for you, it's okay for me. Addicts do tend to flock like birds together, and therefore they become enabling one to another. And you see that in the various levels of government, where if you've got debt, it's okay for me to have debt. So you've got this, not only the sense of joining together, we have the sense of enabling, and we have the sense that it's as the debt increases, that we need more of it, we need it more often, and we start losing sight of what our real purposes should be. Look at this other line here, affecting motivation and memory functions. I think a lot of us have forgotten the days when the books would be balanced, when there was a pride in the savings of a country, when there was a sense that we earned and paid for what we earned. We didn't go into the grandchildren's pockets to satisfy our lives or preferences today. We also have the sense that one sense of addiction breeds into another addiction. So, in other words, if people are addicted in one area, they may be addicted in others. And one of the critical issues of any kind of drug use, of all any where there's been where there's a process of addiction, is a place of recognizing the disease. We'll call it a disease. There's much therapy work that has done that this isn't a question of confrontation. It is a question of drawing alongside and asking people to recognize, as we are, to recognize the risk of this addiction and the damage that it may be causing. That as we draw alongside people, we have the ability to help people to recognize the very nature of this indebtedness, which is the drug we're talking about, the debt. As we look at the debt and as we start identifying it, the truth of the matter is that every addict, whatever corridor they may be in, needs to be able to come to that point of recognizing this unhealthy dependency. And when we recognize that unhealthy dependency, then by all means we can put our hands up and say, I need help. But let's deal first of all with the recognizing the addiction. I think all of us know of times where someone has an addiction, and what you hear is the individuals saying, I don't think I'm really addicted because I can stop doing this for 2 days, 3 weeks, 1 month, or whatever it is. But the addiction is still present. It hasn't just gone away. It's taken a pause, if you will. And countries will do that. They will put in these budgets and say, right, we're going to take care of this debt and we're not going to allow it to increase. And that goes on for a month, and the next thing you know, they're back to where they started. The addict is very typical of that. I know I can stop it. I can stop it. I'll prove it. I can stop it for a month or a week, but I'm still at it a month or a week later, as indeed is the experience with national governments these days. They give this appearance of saying we're taking it in hand, and naturally they haven't, and haven't really recognized the nature of the beast. So we've got that going on. And so we need the issue of recognizing the disease, number one. And in recognizing the disease, there has to be that genuine interest in resolving it. There's an old joke, and it's not really a joke, but it makes the point reasonably well, which is how many psychiatrists does it take to replace a light bulb? And the answer is only one, but the light bulb needs to want to be changed. Therefore, when governments engage in this debt mania and this debt addiction, this disorder, they need to be not only identifying the actual illness itself, the sickness, but also to develop and to present an, a purpose of bringing it under control. Nobody's saying that an addict can be resolved within a matter of hours, but there is a point where it needs to be dealt with immediately. It is interesting that the piece that we read together, where it says here the addicted persons need immediate help. Immediate help. If you think of the addict that shows up at a therapeutic center, the first thing the therapeutic center is going to work on is how do we stop the addiction, the actual practice of it. And there are therapeutic ways of dealing with it, and there's ways of bringing people off gradually and different techniques, and that's fine. But the truth of the matter is that there has to be a recognition that this spiral of debt is in fact destructive, it is a disorder, and it is producing harmful consequences. In this example that we read out together again, it says affecting motivation and memory functions. We've already talked about the memory issue, that we've forgotten those days or set aside those days when we had our lives in national lives in good order. But we also find motivation, because if you know that something is going to take care of you, even if that is through the process of indebtedness, there's a sense that why would I bother to be motivated when it's going to be looked after for me anyway? It's that sense of the government will take care of me. And whatever moral issue you want to apply to the government will look after me, which is one thing, we also need to look at the sources of how that care takes place. And if it is being done through this addiction to debt, then it stands to reason that we need to be able to circumvent, we need to be able to cauterize this addiction and to find out what it is that we can do to replace the debt with motivation, with prosperity, with hope, with action. But you can't have that kind of motivation and that kind of excitement for the future when, in fact, you are being submerged by an addiction, in this case, debt. And here's the real point about this addiction to debt, and that is when we confront debt, when we confront an addiction, I'm not talking about coming in with two by fours and anger and this kind of thing. I am talking about understanding the disease that is creating this behavior. Because if you look at alcohol as an addiction and recognize that its initial phases was because of the comfort and because of its way to avoid issues and so on, we need to be able to be nations, governments, leadership that will allow us to be able to look at the underlying symptom or the underlying problem that is creating this reason for indebtedness. And if the reason is that the government is trying to do too much for too many people, it stands to reason that there's going to be less output by the government for fewer people. That is one way to bring the debt into a proportion, a reasonable proportion. It's not so much coming up with the answers at this stage, as much as recognizing the debt as an addiction and thinking about it from a therapeutic point of view, from a disease point of view, from a point of view of understanding the difference between the symptom of the debt and the problem of the debt that underlies it. But here is the one thing that probably applies to every alcoholic, and I say alcoholic because that's the biggest one of the lot, but to every addiction. There is one thing that we hear over and again, which is Is the family, is the community, is the organization, the people around the addict, are they in fact enabling? Are they in fact enabling it? That can happen because of a lack of confrontation, of not actually identifying the problem and bringing it to the individual's attention. That's one thing. But we can also enable things by not only failing to confront it, but also taking a sort of shrug of the shoulders attitude and just say, well, that's somebody else's problem. It seems that the debt addiction is, in fact, a proxy on it's somebody else's problem because we're trying to push the ball down the road for somebody else to pick up the pieces. It's somebody else's problem. This whole business of being an addict is one where we start confusing our sense of responsibility. And if we are going to be responsible, if we are going to say to ourselves, yes, this is an addiction, then by every definition, we need to be the ones who do not enable it. This calls on a societal, individual actually, but also collective responsibility to be able to witness to the government that whatever our preferences may be and whatever our needs may be, we also have to recognize that the greater cancer is the debt and that we need to bring that under control. There is no point in me getting satisfaction for my issue to find out that cancer is growing within the national orbit. That is not a good equation. Therefore, we need to be able to come to the table collectively and to put this thought around. And I'm asking you to share this around because this debt is a vortex. It has got a one-way answer to it. It doesn't have a two-way answer to it. It doesn't suggest prosperity. It doesn't suggest productivity. It doesn't suggest hope. It doesn't suggest that we are going to be liberated to be able to function at a higher level. As a matter of fact, rather than being a liberator, it is a suppressor. It is a repressor. And it places governments in an increasingly powerful, shall we call it, position to be able to take control of our lives, where the government says we have to take care of the debt, and therefore we're going to have to ask people to contribute more. In asking to contribute more to an addiction seems to me ultimately ridiculous. Can you imagine you're talking to an alcoholic and you say, I'll tell you what, let me bring you another martini. That is not the solution. The solution is to wean the individual off the proverbial martini. It is to ask that individual to recognize the insult, the criminality, the vortex that this addiction is taking us into, and the damage that is being done. And how many times have we heard the damage that is being done, not only to the individual, but to the family? And it happens in partnerships, in marriages, in organizations. It is a death sentence, if you will, and the debt is a death sentence. And it is time for us to recognize its addictive nature. It is time for us then to disable the debt machine by no longer being an enabler. We have this within our capacity to recognize the addiction. And when in any of our families, any of our communities and friendships and so on, when we see an addiction and think about the pain that it causes and the difficulties of turning it around, nonetheless, we need to be able to join hands in a spirit of unity and community and join together and present to the government or governments that they are in fact suffering from this addiction, and it is time for them to come into the hospital ward, to come to the clinic, of recognizing the responsibilities they have to the community that is not going to be effectively carried by debt. It's an addiction and it needs to be taken under control. I would like this message to be shared, reposted, to be allowed to go as far and wide as possible. It's not unique to North America. It's not unique to Europe. It's everywhere, this indebtedness issue. And it is time that we joined forces, joined hands, that we find ourselves in a place of collaboration. This message is brought to you by Respectonomics, by Jeremy Wentworth Stanley. We are available for workshops, consultations. They can be remote, they can be in person, but we need to be able to address this issue. And the fastest way to do it, as the article says here, the addicted persons need immediate help. This is a call for now, not a call for tomorrow. Thank you for listening, and please share this message. Jeremy@respectonomics.com. Jeremy@respectonomics.com. Thank you.